Alright everybody, despite the fact that the critical race theory's own academic proponents have very clearly and explicitly laid out the basic framework of what critical race theory is about, you see legacy media propaganda piece after propaganda piece, link in the description, archived of course for an example of this, that whitewash it and attempt to ignore several extremely pertinent points about critical race theory in order to try to make it more palatable. So basically, what it actually is and what it's presented as simply aren't the same thing. The legacy media presents it as though it was essentially, in essence, anti-racism training. The idea is basically to try to stop racism. Now, while this is the central tenet and goal of critical race theory, that part is true. The points that are actually made deviate wildly from anything that a reasonable individual would think is going to tackle the problem of racism, or systemic racism as they mythologically believe in. For example, as I pointed out in my 5-part refutation of critical race theory, two of the points that these people have made literally self-refute. For example, the use of a racial hierarchical system as a grievance while calling that racial hierarchical system itself inherently suppressive and oppressive and created by bigots. A house divided against itself will not stand, as I said before. In point number 4, in the Vox article that did a write-up that includes, snippets, literal quotes from the people that are pushing CRT, it admits to influence from Marxism. Show me where in this article that is admitted to. I would think that's a pertinent point. The vast majority of Americans hear Marxism and they don't like it. They do not support it. That's to their infinite credit, by the way. Marxism is not popular. When you therefore are very honest about what critical race theory pertains to, if you are honest about what it contains, it would never be deployed except in like San Francisco or New York, blue cities. You'd get a CRT inclusion in Hippieville. You'd get it in the elite urban coaster region, basically the Democratic core, ironically. You wouldn't get it in small towns, wouldn't accept it. Even most blue states wouldn't accept it. You wouldn't have it in Minnesota. You wouldn't have it in New Mexico. You'd have it in California and like New York, New Jersey, and places like that, and that's basically where it would be limited to. That's because only in those places is the school system so bad already that this would be considered a necessary inclusion. Like at this point, they don't even, kids graduate from school, they already can't do their taxes, half of them don't know how to mail a fucking letter, and yet you want to have basically the mythology. It ties in with, the 1619 Project, if I remember correctly, as the name of it, with the concept that slavery built the United States, that skyscrapers are made of cotton. Totally overlooks the Homestead Act, totally overlooks the cotton gin abolition, in essence. Literally overlooks all of U.S. history in favor of fixating on one short period of time, essentially, one particular issue, the slave debate, and extrapolating from that literally everything that we have and every bit of wealth in the Western world is the result of hyper-enlightened people from another continent that unfortunately they got colonized, they got conquested. Sad for them, but they worked really hard because they were so great and they built literally everything. So in other words, you wouldn't even have roads if it weren't for the transatlantic slave trade is basically the New York Times idea behind that. It's clearly false. It's ahistorical revisionist garbage. It's basically that the whole idea is, I guess, to wreck the education system and indoctrinate people and wrap it all up in a facade of it solely being about racial justice so that anyone who opposes it, despite it being admittedly partially influenced by Marxism, that the idea is that anyone that targets it, therefore, they're racist. Or at the very least, they're not anti-racist enough. They don't want reparations, therefore they don't want social justice. Oh my God, we'll never solve anything. That the whole idea of critical race theory as well relies upon the concept that the traditional civil rights struggle is wrong. So basically, fuck Martin Luther King, I suppose. Screw that Malcolm X. What did he ever do for us? We won't have justice until we get more freebies, more reparations. Until we are held up on a pedestal. Well, you already are by literally every corporation in the Fortune 500 list. Every single one of them flies the BLM flag, flies the pride flag and stuff. At what point can you look at culture, therefore, and say, this doesn't appear to be a systemically racist, bigoted, sexist, homophobic culture? Quite the opposite. It is literally obsessed with constant knee-taking and disavowal of anything that is even labeled problematic, again, by usually rich individuals, rich, empowered, privileged individuals of all races and creeds and colors. But it's almost like a national obsession. It's literally the opposite, but there is no progress being made because that's not racial justice either. It's a combination of corporate grandstanding and people being delusional. Critical race theory is a delusion. And it's also a lie. I focus more, instead of fixating on the racial component, which is the facade that they want you to attack so they can label you a bigot, focus on the fact that it's simply ahistorical and derives in part from communism. Self-admittedly, this is according to the people who have advanced critical race theory, believe in it, and want it promulgated. They have admitted it. The legacy media so far has not used the term Marxism in any single release that I've seen with regards to the subject. It's always these bumpkins, these out-of-touch older white bumpkin Appalachian dirt floor dwellers just don't understand our ivory tower intellectualism, and so they reject it. They're afraid because they're ignorant. That's basically how it's being cast off. Well, no, the ignorance is not self-admitting to the backdrop to which critical race theory actually owes itself to. That's intellectually lazy. I mean, if it's Marxist, if you believe in critical race theory, and therefore in part you believe in communism, shout it loud and proud and see how people react. After all, your theory, I guess, you hold to it and you're convinced that it's true. Who cares then? Well then, I guess you can fight for Marxism. See? You're basically proclaiming elements of communist revisionism. You know, they already do this with economics and fail all the time. Is true, so proclaim that. Be honest about what you really are. A fucking goddamn commie. That's about all. Peace out.